Hi Vintage Bakers! Today I'm in the kitchen making sweet runny butter tarts. This butter tart recipe is for a thin, syrupy center with a hint of maple. And the raisins? Well, that's up to you. If you're a fan of butter tarts with a sweet runny center, then this is your recipe. If you prefer your butter tarts with a stiff, thick filling, then check the link in the description box below for the perfect butter tart recipe for you. So let's get into the kitchen. This is how I make butter tarts. The first thing I need to do is make the pastry for the tart shells. For this recipe, I'm using my go-to rich and flaky pastry dough. But if you want to save some time, feel free to buy the pre-made mini tart shells from the grocery store. I'm going to be using my food processor to make quick work of the pastry dough. No food processor? No problem. You could easily make this recipe by hand in a large bowl. To my food processor, I'm going to add 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1 tablespoon of sugar. Pulse this a few times to mix the dry ingredients together. Now I need to cut 1 cup of fridge cold butter into cubes. This is going to add all that flaky, buttery richness to my tart shells. With the food processor on low, I'm going to drop little handfuls of butter through the funnel. As soon as all of the butter is in, stop the machine. An overmixed dough will end up tough and chewy and won't have that perfect melt-in-your-mouth texture after it's baked. So make sure to handle the dough as little as possible. Next, with the food processor on low, I'm going to add in 1 beaten egg. Then, to help bring the dough together, I'm going to mix a 1/4 cup of cold water with 2 teaspoons of vinegar. With the food processor on low again, I'm going to slowly pour the liquid through the funnel. As soon as the dough clumps together, stop the machine. You may need to use some or all of the liquid. To easily make this exact same dough without a food processor, grab a large bowl and add the flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. I'm going to stir to mix all of my dry ingredients together. Now I can drop in the cubed butter. I'm going to do this in 2 or 3 batches. Give the cold butter a quick dusting in the flour so they don't stick back together again. Once all the cubes are in, you can use a pastry blender to cut in the butter, but I'm just going to use the tips of my fingers. Rub the flour and butter through your fingertips, breaking up the butter and turning it into a crumbly coarse meal consistency. After all of the butter is evenly mixed into the flour, add in the lightly beaten egg. Finally, I'm going to add in the water and vinegar mixture. The best way to bring the dough together is with your hands. I'm going to squish and squeeze the dough together instead of the kneading motion you would use for bread. You can tip the dough out onto the counter and squeeze and pat it together. Try to handle the dough as little as possible. Now that my pastry dough is ready, I'm going to shape it into a disc, wrap it in plastic wrap, and then pop it into the fridge to chill for about an hour. For the dough I made in the food processor, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Remove the dough from the machine and shape it into a flattened disc. Cover in plastic wrap and pop it into the fridge to chill. This is going to make it easier to roll the dough out. Now that my dough is chilled, I can roll it out on a lightly floured surface. I'm making sure to move and turn my dough often to make sure nothing is sticking to the counter or my rolling pin. If it starts to stick, sprinkle on a little more flour. Since I'm making mini personal-sized tart shells with this pastry, I'm going to cut it into individual dough discs. I'm I'm using a muffin tray to make my tarts, so this large round cookie cutter is the perfect size. You can also use the rim of a large glass that's a little bigger than the cups of the muffin tin, or a biscuit cutter will work perfectly. Form each dough disc to the inside of each muffin cup. Once all the cups are filled, the hard part is done. Set this aside and we'll get on with making the filling. I'm going to use a large glass measuring cup to mix the filling because it pours everything easily into the tart shells, but any pourable bowl or container you have at home will work just as well. Add in a 1/4 cup of soft butter and 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. Mix this together. I'm going to mix in 3/4 of a cup of corn syrup, a 1/4 cup of maple syrup, 2 eggs, and a pinch of salt. Mix this into the sugar. Butter tarts are typically made with raisins, currants, or chopped pecans. However, adding in the raisins and currants will soak up some of the liquid inside of each shell when it's baking, which will make them less runny. So if you're hoping for a gooey, runny butter tart, it's best to leave them plain. For mine, I'm going to make some with raisins and some without. You feel free to add or not add whatever your family prefers. If you're planning on adding the raisins or nuts into the butter tarts for a full batch, which is about 12 tarts, you'll need a 1/2 cup of mix-ins. I'm going to sprinkle my raisins into the unbaked tart shells just before adding my filling. Now I can simply pour the mixture into the unbaked tart shells. Fill them just below the top of the pastry so they don't bubble over in the oven. They will still be delicious, it only makes it a little more tricky to remove them from the tin. I'm going to place my butter tarts in a preheated 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius oven, and then immediately turn it down to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius. I'm going to bake my tarts for 20 to 25 minutes, or until they have bubbled up and have a little puff to the filling. Remove them from the oven and then let them cool completely before serving. Enjoy! If you're a fan of deliciously simple vintage recipes and old-fashioned skills, then you'll want to check out this next video. Thanks for stopping by.